Здравствуйте. Добрый день, мой товарищи, мой друг, с Новым годом. Comrades, the Truth and Neutrality Alliance have gathered here today to voice their concerns over the US's ongoing involvement in what they like to refer to as Russia's invasion of its sovereign neighbour, Ukraine. This is a mischaracterization on so many levels, and I'm going to explain why without going in too deep historically. I would speak about Zbigniew Brzezinski's ambitions and his instrumental participation in the Soviet-Afghan war and his designs on the motherland. This would take up too much of our time. I could talk about the Gorbachev era, how Gorbachev took it in good faith, the promise of no NATO expansion by Jim Baker to Edward Shevardnadze in regards to NATO not expanding eastwards by a ton width, not an inch guys, by a ton width, were the words that Jim Baker spoke to Edward Shevardnadze during those negotiations. Subsequent to this promise being broken by George Bush Jr., later Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, whose admin orchestrated the overthrow of the Yanukovych government. And we all know how Obama's Rottweiler, Victoria Nuland, bragged about spending $5 billion in organising the Maidan coup, which was bloody and horrific and led to the civil war in Ukraine, as the puppets Nuland and Poya decided to put in place an ultra-nationalist Nazi contingent in the Rada, who decided to wage war on the predominantly ethnic Russian region of Donbass. During this time, Joe Biden, who was Obama's vice president, used $1 billion of US taxpayer money to bribe Petro Poroshenko to fire Ukraine's chief prosecutor because he was investigating Ukrainian energy company Burisma, which coincidentally Hunter Biden happened to be on the board of. I figured that one out. During the first Trump administration, we can't ignore the fact that NATO was starting to flood Ukraine with heavy weaponry, and the slaughter of ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine was underway. It's well known that Biden and his hawks Nuland, who he reinstated, were championing the ethnic cleansing that was happening in Donbass. We know that when Vladimir Putin's hand was forced in February of 2022 to intervene in Ukraine, the US and NATO had given their new puppet in the Rada, Vladimir Zelensky, permission to continue with their Russophobic project of killing ethnic Russians, banning Russian culture, burning Russian books, and worse again, banning the Russian language, which was laughable as it's still the dominant language in Ukraine to this day, among Ukrainian and also among Ukrainian refugees who have proliferated throughout Europe. What's more concerning to us at this present time is that on the 24th of April 2019, a document was published by the RAND Corporation, a Pentagon think tank. Although they claim to be non-profit, non-biased, non-partisan, they are heavily tied to the US military-industrial complex. The document, titled Extending Russia Competing from Advantageous Ground, which was co-authored by Rafi Cohen and former EU Ambassador to the European Union, Jim Dobbins, is in fact a declaration of war on Russia by the United States, using Ukraine as their proxy. The documents explicitly state that they could exhaust Russia militarily, economically, and more concerning in manpower by using Ukraine to fight its war. By it I mean the US and NATO. Now that Trump is back in power as the new POTUS, not only has he not been able to keep his promise of ending the war within the goals that he had, within the time that he has specified, but he has been making giving impossible ultimatums to Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation. Is Trump pleading ignorance to the RAND documents that were written on his watch? Has he reined in any of the hawks that published this declaration of war? He is talking about making deals and making demands of both the Russian Federation and Ukraine, while not talking about his administration's participation in this war. The United States owes the Russian Federation a massive apology and maybe even reparations too, as this was their war.